The United States Constitution asks us, the citizens, to do 4 things: to vote, to serve on a jury, to pay taxes, and to serve in the military when called upon. This past summer, a well-respected circuit court judge from my hometown sadly passed away. After much discussion and deliberation around the kitchen table, my father decided to throw his hat into the ring and run for the vacant seat. Seeing as how the election for judgeship is nonpartisan, he decided to attend both Democratic and Republican Party meetings in order to meet as many people as possible. As his trusty campaign sidekick, I had the pleasure of attending these meetings with him and experiencing campaigning firsthand. However, throughout the summer and early autumn, I began to notice something strange. In meeting after meeting, I was constantly surprised by our cool and chilly reception. I sensed a note of alienation and avoidance, almost like a high school cafeteria. You know, when you're walking along looking for a familiar face to ask you to sit and eat lunch. We felt distrusted and suspect. This feeling continued until we described that the election for judgeship was nonpartisan. Suddenly, the room temperature changed from cold to warm. The second observation I made was that regardless of party affiliation, the content within the meetings was the same. We heard less about candidate qualifications and vision and a lot more about the party. We noticed that it didn't quite matter why a candidate wanted to run for office or what they intended to do if elected. As long as they were a member of that party, they had the support of the party and trust and favor of the individuals within it. It seemed that candidates were less about running to serve and benefit the people and more about running to gain a political point for their party. But the third and most shocking observation was to hear the hate and disdain that was spewed upon the opposition. The opposing party was always the enemy. Its members were spoken of in harsh derogatory terms, and its candidates were not only likely to ruin the country, but were obviously trying to do so on purpose. We've all heard about this phenomenon in the news. It's called hyper-partisanship, an extremist form of tribalism in which those in one party not only disagree with, but distrust and refuse to work with anyone from the opposing party. Political scientists have identified the mechanism as an in-group loyalty, out-group hostility complex, where members of the in-group merit immediate support, and members of the out-group deserve unquestioned hostility. Each group sees themselves as the good, the light, the panacea, and so naturally the opposite group must be evil, darkness, and apocalyptic. Hyperpartisan attitudes compel a bias so extreme to the point where the opinions and ideas of one party are immediately disregarded, simply because they're from the opposing party. After all, who wants to do business with evil? Now, the United States Constitution is silent on the matter of political parties. Indeed, from the very beginning, our founders demurred at the thought of political factions. In fact, John Adams wrote that there is nothing I dread so much as a division of the republic into 2 great parties. This is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution. Later, both Hamilton and Madison wrote against parties in their Federalist Papers. Nonetheless, by the 1790s, the framers started to coalesce on starkly different ideologies. Alexander Hamilton, who was eager to influence public opinion about issues and candidates, expressed them through his Federalist Papers. Those who were in strong opposition to Hamilton's ideas of a strong centralized government did likewise, thus creating the Democratic-Republican Party. Let me now warn you, President George Washington wrote in his 1796 farewell address, in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies, kindles animosity, foments riot and insurrection, and opens the door to foreign influence and corruption. It is the duty and interest of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. 275 years later, consider this. In 2008, a study by the Pew Research Center found that 35% of Republicans and 32% of Democrats had a negative view of the opposing party. In 2016, those numbers soared to 55% and 58% respectively. A study by the PLOS found that, despite short-term fluctuations, congressional productivity has been exponentially decreasing over the past 60 years as lawmakers would rather there be a political standstill than to work with or trust the opposing party. A study conducted in 1960 found that 5% of Republicans and 4% of Democrats would be unhappy if their son or daughter married someone from the opposing party. That same study conducted in 2010 found that 49% of Republicans and 35% of Democrats would be unhappy if their son or daughter married someone from the opposing party. Ill-founded jealousies, animosity, and false alarms. But the major divide is the violence. A study done by the Pew Research Center found that 47% of Republicans and 45% of Democrats think that the other party is so dangerous that it poses as a threat to the very existence of our nation. And the result? Politically motivated violence. From the past 2 years alone, the headlines have exploded. March 2016, St. Louis, Missouri, 2 people injured. June 2016, Sacramento, California, 10 people hospitalized with stab wounds. November of 2016, Oakland, California, 3 people injured, storefront windows smashed, and cars and trash set ablaze in the streets. June of 2017, Alexandria, Virginia, 4 people attacked and 1 person shot. Charlottesville, Virginia, July 2017, 19 people injured and 1 killed and too many more. It should pain all of us to think that each of these events are due to political unrest, but notice that I didn't state the political affiliation of any of those affected, even though each tragic event was politically motivated. Because regardless of their political affiliation, those people are still people, like you and me. But the headlines of election protesters injured, Republicans responsible, or Republicans attacked, liberals accountable, continue to plague our social medias and newspapers. Have we become so polarized that even in grief, we ask to know the victim's political affiliation and then immediately point the finger of doubt and suspicion upon the opposing party? Our fellow citizens foments riot and insurrection. The United States Constitution asks us, the citizens, to do 4 things, remember? To vote, to serve on a jury, to pay taxes, and to serve in the military when called upon. However, there is more to being a citizen of the United States. Indeed, Madison tells us right there in the very first line, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. Our very first task and the whole purpose of the Constitution is to seek a more perfect union. We needn't bother debating original intent or fundamental rights if we cannot first recognize our moral obligation to ourselves and to our country. Out of many, we are one, and it is the duty of every one of us to defy hyper-partisanship and the falsehood of competition in politics. We must remember that this country, this democracy, is a team, and we must therefore act accordingly together under a united cause. So how can we, the people, form a more perfect union? I suggest 4 things. 1, remember the golden rule. Treat our fellow citizens as we would want to be treated, regardless of their race, religion, gender, ethnicity, class, and political affiliation. 2, hold our government leaders and elected officials accountable for their words and actions before, during, and after their time in office. Because leaders who lack honor and dignity in word and action enable a people to lack honor and dignity. 3, trouble yourself to honestly see things from another's point of view. Test your theories by walking a mile in another's shoes. And 4, demand that your leaders humble themselves, their work, and their rhetoric for the good of their citizens and country. After all, compromise is not a 4-letter word. I think we can do better. I think we should try harder, and in fact, I think we owe it to ourselves and our fellow countrymen to do so. As Martin Luther King Jr. once said, we may have all come on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. Thank you.